Welcome into a new BuffStampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined by William Gardner, our football analyst. And William, the spring semester at CU begins on Tuesday. We're celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day today, and the team is down in Denver. It's kind of a cool deal. They're helping feed the homeless at the Denver Rescue Mission, and then they're going to be taking part of the parade that takes place down there. Gosh, it was awful timing with the weather here in Colorado. I can count on one hand in 20 plus years living in the state of a stretch like this, but it sounds like there's kind of an Arctic wave that's consuming this whole area, right?
And that parade is a march and a parade. So, last I looked, it was like 5 below zero. So, good Lord, I was just downtown all day yesterday working, getting ready for trial. And I was thinking I didn't even see the stock show parade go by this year. So, good luck and wow, good for those folks that show up for that.
I've had this question posed to me randomly a few times in my life of, if you could have dinner with any person, dead or alive, who would it be? And the answer is always going to be Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so this is something that I appreciate. The celebration of what he accomplished. And I remember moving to Arizona in 1990, and at that time they didn't celebrate it. And kudos to my parents. They say, you don't have to go to school today. Like, you're not going to go to school today because this is something that we need to observe. And so I appreciate that sentiment from my parents. And it's great that it is a holiday that everybody gets off.
Right. Well, and it's an important one, and I think it's important in Denver and important for those players too. I'm glad that they sent them down there. I mean, I have some sort of tangential contacts with that mission, and there's a lot of hurting people in Denver, and it's good for those kids to see that when they're thinking about NIL and everything else.
Today's episode is brought to us by Macaulay Capital Fractional CFO Services. Is your business looking for financial guidance and support, but not yet big enough to hire a full-time CFO? Well, we have a solution for you. Hiring a fractional CFO who can work with your business on a part-time basis. You get the benefit of having a seasoned financial expert on your team without the commitment or expense of a full-time hire. And here's the best part. It's likely that a partnership with Macaulay Capital will be a win-win situation, meaning that your business will make more money from the guidance of a fractional CFO than the total cost of partnering with us. For more information or to set up a meeting, please visit MacaulayCapital.com. That's MCCAULEY Capital.com. Jason Phillips joins Colorado staff as the new receivers coach. He has spent a lot of time in the coaching industry. I was really impressed with just his message to the team. You can tell this is a cerebral type of coach, and over 20 years of coaching experience. He was with Coach Prime at Jackson State, spent a lot of time at Utah State. I'm going to run down he also spent time at Oregon State, Kansas, time with the Denver Broncos, SMU, Houston, Baylor, Texas State, was an intern with the Atlanta Falcons, Minnesota Vikings. So he's been well seasoned as a coach, and I don't know much beyond that. This is kind of new news, and we only knew about it because there was a video that came out from their team meeting yesterday.
Yeah, and he's a veteran coach, and he's been around. He did a year at Oregon State, and the year before that was at Kansas. So, he's coached in a lot of bowl games at Houston and Utah State. I saw somebody posted on the board, oh, he's just another JSU guy. Well, he's really obviously far more than that. Just because a guy coached with Prime at JSU doesn't mean he didn't have a career outside of that couple of years. So I think he's a good addition, and certainly has been. If you look at his write up from the JSU website, he's been involved with some top notch offenses and putting up a lot of points and a lot of receiving yards. So I think it looks like a good hire to me, and I think it's always important that new guys fit well with the head coach. So we'll see. I think, I guess an interesting question raised is, to what extent the coordinators, or Shermer in this case, had input on hiring his staff. But I think he's a good addition.
Yeah, no, and that moves Brett Bartolone to tight ends coach. We don't know what the tight end's going to look like in this new offense, right? But Shermer is more of a NFL background. Does that mean that we expect that position to be more included or not necessarily? It's hard to say. We didn't really see with Pat Shermer the full scope of what he's going to do with this offense because you can't change an offense, obviously,
Right.
8 games into the season. So I am anxious when we get a chance to talk to Coach Shermer. In I mentioned that Jason Phillips is kind of a cerebral coach. Pat Shermer is, if you looked up cerebral in the dictionary, you might see his picture there. I really like that quality in an offensive coordinator. We had that with Brian Lindgren for a time at Colorado, and he went on to Oregon State to do really well. There's something about playing chess as opposed to being emotional in that role, right?
Right. And I've always thought, I think defensive coordinators, defense needs more emotion, and offense needs more thinking, and to what's the word I'm looking for, to do their jobs right. There's a word I'm looking for, a football word. I can't pull it up because I'm getting old, I guess. But to produce and get their jobs done, and an offensive coordinator needs to see 3 or 4 moves ahead and anticipate changes or whatever. And a defense needs to play with its hair on fire and go crazy out there, and still be assignment oriented. But you don't need your offensive and defensive coordinators to be the guys that fire up your team. So the people that are concerned that he's a boring guy, who cares? I mean, that's not his job.
Off that, William, I will say the number one thing that popped in my head when Charles Kelly left Colorado staff was it felt like he could get those guys to play with their hair on fire. And that is a quality that I liked most about him as a DC. Now, statistically, CU's defense was pretty awful in 2023. Now you can talk about why that was. They were good in the red zone. They were kind of a bend but don't break type of defense, and I guess they broke enough for them not to win more than 4 games. But I liked his ability to get those guys at times to really play inspired football. And that's what I hope the next defensive coordinator, who we don't know who it's going to be, Coach Prime addressed that at the team meeting, said that, hey, the NFL is still going on. We're going to get this right. And we've
Yeah.
heard the NFL, those three letters used quite a bit in terms of this defensive coordinator hire that's going to come. I don't know. I threw a lot at you there, William, but that's a quality that you need in your DC, and that's why more than anything on paper, I wanted Charles Kelly to be to be this team's DC in 2024.
Well, and I think the people that are judging that defense by statistics are on the wrong base. And I don't think you judge. To me, everybody do what you want, and obviously on the board, everybody can do what they want. But I don't judge a defense by statistics. I think that defense, especially in the second half of the season, played well enough to win a lot of games, and the damned offense didn't show up. And so there were several. I think that defense played well enough for us to have 6 or 7 wins, and it didn't have all the pieces it needed, quite frankly. So I was looking forward to improvement on that score this season too. But now we're going to move on, and we're going to have somebody different, and we'll see what they do with it. So I'm excited. I think he's putting a lot of thought into. I have a based, just on comments here and there, and I have a suspicion he knows who he's got or who he wants, and we're just waiting on that guy. I don't have inside information as to what that name is.
I wish I did too, but actually I don't, because then I'd just have to sit on it. I can't report on it until Coach
Yeah.
Prime wants it out there. But
You
whoever
can
is
whisper,
going,
you can whisper it to me after we finish.
I actually have a couple ideas, so I will do that. The Buffs added a couple defensive players with no DC, segueing us into Nikhil Webb-Walker and defensive lineman Torian Carter joining the herd. Nikhil Webb-Walker from New Mexico State put up good pass rush numbers this past season, and Torian Carter coming in from Arkansas as William gets disrobed there in the background.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted there. Any thoughts
You
there
know,
on those guys coming in?
yeah, I think I think it's exciting to some of the guys that we're bringing in here. Hold on one second. Let me get back to where I'm trying to be here. Um,
It's like
so I
negative 10 degrees outside. Why are you taking off clothes?
well, because you got the heat going in here and it's driving me
Okay.
out. You know, the dry heat. You know what I'm saying? Now it's snowing like I'm out the window. It's snowing like crazy. So I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe I should just open the window and put on an Arctic Parker or something, man. Holy cow! I'm excited about both of these guys, and I think they're very different kinds of players. One is long and athletic, and the other one is more traditionally inside defensive tackle kind of a guy. And so I think we're adding to that defensive line, and we can get over to where I want to be. So I think that so Torian Carter is kind of that big guy that people are looking for in the middle. Coming from Arkansas, he's been playing against big SEC offensive lines, so he knows how to handle himself against big guys that can block. And he's kind of a guy that can sort of plug up your middle for you. And then Webb Walker is a whole entirely different kind of a guy, more like. And I'm not saying this on a talent level, but just in terms of body size and style, more like a J.J. Watt kind of a guy, tall and more leaner and kind of give you some things off the edge and be a great 5 technique to play a little 3 and then get on the edge and give you kind of an entirely different sort of an edge player with his height and length. He's one of those guys that's hard to throw over. So I think he'd be more of a pass rush guy. I think Torian Carter is a guy that kind of helps you plug up the middle. And, along with a couple of the other guys we've picked up, will give us a much stiffer defensive line up the middle. I think him and Anquan Barnes and Nwankwo give us an entirely different defensive line this year, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I like that analysis. I don't have a whole lot to add there, but Nick Saban, who retired this past week, and we'll touch on that,
Did that
made a
happen? I
comment.
didn't hear anything about. I didn't hear anything about that.
Well, he made a comment that sacks are the most underrated stats that they're. I'm sorry. Nick Saban said that sacks are the most overrated stat in college football, and it's about pressures, it's about hits.
Right. Right.
And we can sit here for the next 10 hours talking about Pro Football Focus and how they have the resources to cover things the way they do, but their pressure numbers, their hits on opposing quarterbacks for both Nikhil Webb Walker and Torian Carter are off the charts. And so that was, as I was looking at both those guys, one of the things that really kind of stood out to me about what they bring to the table. Do you agree with that as somebody that's coached both lines in terms of sacks being overrated versus kind of we don't talk about pressures, we don't talk about quarterback hurries, we don't
Right.
talk about quarterback hits the way we do about sacks, but um, unfortunately, following Colorado in 2023, you saw the impact that had. Shador Sanders was sacked 52 times, but really my head goes right back to that UCLA game, and there were times he didn't get to his
Yeah.
first read
Yeah.
before somebody was in his face, and it didn't always register as a sack because he was moving around doing whatever he could to buy time in the pocket. But that was the thing that kind of stood out about these guys joining the mix.
Well, you kind of just asked me, am I going to have the arrogance to disagree with arguably the best coach that ever existed in college football? So I'm not, and I have always long agreed with him. For every sack, if you got a good defense, you're going to have 4 or 5 pressures, and really, the pressures are just as effective as the sacks. Obviously, you don't lose yards with the pressure versus a sack, but if you can get in a quarterback's head and get him rattled so that he's watching the pass rush instead of the coverage, then you are have made a huge impact on your defense and your ability to affect the team you're playing against. So pressures, I think, have always been a huge deal, and they don't get a lot of notice or stats, and guys who can get a hand on, hit him after he throws, so it's not quite a sack, but it's still a pressure, and putting the quarterback on his back and being there when he's trying to throw, and changing his steps and changing his throwing motions and such. That's a huge deal, and I think like people say last year, like Shane Coates. I've seen on the board, Shane Coates didn't do much. That is so much crap because he was all over people. He just didn't get the stats. He didn't get the sack. He didn't get the tackle, but he made people change their tracks. He made running backs go to different places. And so defensive linemen, and I would include it in the havoc rate, frankly, defensive linemen who can get into lanes and make a difference and put pressure on a quarterback and hit running backs, I think are priceless. And these guys are certainly good at that. And so, and especially, Torian Carter is doing it in the SEC. So he's not doing it against bad offensive line. He's doing it against big old, beefy offensive linemen. So I think he brings something to our team that I think we've been missing.
Since we last talked, William Jacquez Robinson, defensive back, hit the transfer portal. He played corner, nickel, and safety for the Buffs in 2023. Was coming back from an injury. He had a hamstring thing that he was dealing with all season. I don't know if we really know what his potential is, but when you look at the type of defensive backs, especially a cornerback that are joining the program this spring, it's something as a CU fan I don't think you worry about. I wish we could have gotten to see a healthy Jacquez Robinson in a CU uniform, though. I think he's one of those guys when you're kind of bopping around games on a Saturday when CU's not playing, you want to root for success for him.
Yeah, and I think that he's got the size and the attributes to be a really good player. And for whatever reason, what didn't work out here. And I think with Kelly leaving, it's not surprising that he's moving on to something else. But like you said, with Deion Sanders is your head coach, I'm not ever going to have too much concern about the secondary. They're going to bring those guys in because guys recognize the value of playing defensive back for a guy who's the greatest of all time at the position. And I think we brought in a lot of guys that are going to make a lot of difference back there. So I don't know that he would have started this year, but he would have been nice depth. But somebody asked a question. I guess we'll get to this. Has anybody gotten a portal yet that concerns us? Well, and not me. I don't know. We'll talk more about that, but I'm not too concerned about losing him, to be perfectly honest, because I think there's other guys there.
Yeah, I mean, the people that I guess who was it that asked that question? We can jump right into that. Trying to look down the list here. We'll say we already talked about it when we get there, but the pieces that they've lost were depth pieces, right?
Yeah, and so Dangerous asked that, said, have we lost anyone from the portal yet that surprised or concerned you?
Yeah, I don't think so.
No,
the funny thing is that Walk On and Michael Harrison might be the one that I'd really want in the program going forward, especially given that they haven't really addressed that need aside from Mid-Iyer, who is a step up in terms of being a well-rounded guy, but you kind of like that pass catching option there, especially with Shedeur Sanders as your starting quarterback. But no,
there are some guys.
I love Anthony Hankerson. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I said there's some guys still around that kind of surprised me, but nobody that's left has really, caught my attention.
Yeah, I was asked. I'm trying to think of what show I was doing where they were asking how many guys leaving the program do you expect in the spring transfer window? And I looked at the eligibility chart and counted up 14 guys pretty quick. There's still a little bit of that on the roster. You're not going to bat 1,000 with transfers. There are going to be guys that we're excited about today on January 15th, 2024 that are not going to be what we expected, because there is one thing that I've really learned in this time covering Colorado is that progress is not always linear. Mm-hmm. There are some guys that show up, are great, and you expect, 3-4 years from now, with development, maturation, they're going to be out of this world. And then you kind of watch the dips in there. And
Right.
it's tough. You're a college student. I was an idiot when I was in
Right.
college.
Right.
And so I understand the fact that you're going to have misses in there. But by and large, when you pulled it together a group of incoming transfers like Coach Prime and his staff have done, um, to me, the floor is 6-6. The ceiling,
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Right.
But this is a bowl team. I'm not going to make any plans for Christmas this coming year because I look at the type of talent that is in this roster after two full transfer cycles, and it's pretty impressive.
Well, not even a full transfer cycle yet because we're going to have after spring, another window when we're going to bring some people in. But you mentioned the one guy that I think is a significant loss, which is Hankerson. But I'm a huge Hankerson fan. I think he's a damn good running back, and I think he's never got the respect and the credit from our board that he deserves. And I think he'll do really well somewhere. But that being said, we'll find somebody and we'll fill that spot. But the other thing you mentioned that kind of piqued my old brain was development of these guys. Well, the average male does not really reach his physical peak until his mid-20s, right? So you look at NFL guys that have been in the NFL for, we talk about, hey, 50-year senior, look how mature he is. And you take those 50-year college seniors and then you compare them to a guy 4 years in the NFL, and they're different, man. The 4 years in the NFL guys are grown ass men. Not to say that a 22-year-old, 21-year-old is not, but there's a whole different physical maturity there. And so these guys all the way through their college careers are still developing. And I've always said, I'm not going to give up on a guy's career until it's over, you know? So I think a lot of these guys have a lot to show, and then, some of them don't feel like they're going to fit. And there are others who, we'll probably get to it at some point, who I don't think can play at this level, and we'll see some of those leave and others brought in. So, I'm excited about where we are, though, in terms of developing this roster.
That's great stuff, William. I remember Isaiah Lewis being in an elevator with him, and we had kind of a back and forth. He was upset with me because I had said on one of my position overviews that I didn't expect him to be part of the mix, and uh, he confronted me, and I loved it because that's the mentality you need to get better, right?
Right.
Is that you
Right.
take that stuff and it annoys you and it eats at you and you become better as a
Right.
result. And
Yeah.
he is kind of that example of a guy that 3 years in his college career, I didn't expect him to be much. And then 2020 happens. It was a weird year for everybody. And he is just breaking up passes left and
Right.
right. I think if memory serves, he led the Pac-12 in pass
Right.
breakups that year.
Right. Well, and I remember back, when I was at CU, and I think there was a year, Mark Vanderpool was like 6'7", 310, and then Stan Brock came in for the spring game that year. He was 6'6", 320, so roughly the same size human. Not even any comparison. I mean, Stan Brock, it looks like a mountain. He made Mark Vanderpool look like a child, and yet roughly the same size. So that kind of development just kind of goes on year to year with guys, as long as they keep playing the game and they're working hard.
We already talked about the fact that Jordan Seaton is built like that, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
him coming into the CU men's basketball game the other day, it's like if I'm an edge player, I'm waving the white flag.
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
am not getting by that guy.
takes you the 3 seconds on a quarterback drop just to get around him if he's standing still.
Yeah. All right. We have a whole Buff Stampede mailbag to go through, William. I'm gonna break this up into two shows, but let's close out here on this one. Nick Saban has retired. I still remember his first year at Alabama. They played
Yeah.
Colorado in the
Don't we
Independence
all?
Bowl. Yep.
Remember the hope that we had at that moment? Jesus. Had a top
Yep.
10 recruiting class, and
Yeah. Uh, Obviously, what he did from that moment going forward, and even in that moment, they won that Independence Bowl, was pretty impressive. I really respect Nick Saban for being an ambassador for college football.
right.
And it kind of feels like almost the baton is kind of being handed to Coach Prime in some level. We saw Coach Prime put out some tweets about college football needs to look itself in the mirror. I don't know if Coach Prime wants that responsibility, but he's certainly capable of taking the
Right.
baton in that sense and trying to lead us to some type of leadership. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter who you root for. Everybody wants some type of clarity. Where is this going? What is it going to look like? Regionality has been thrown out the window because of TV companies, and something
Right.
needs to change. It's going to take a really strong person to implement that change. And I'm not putting that on Coach Prime, but I'm just saying, in terms of an outspoken voice, it feels like from Nick Saban retiring, that maybe he's going to be the person in college football that is respected the most in terms of kind of their opinion towards about things that take place nationally.
Well, for that to continue, he's got to win games, and I think because at the end of the day, if you don't win, nobody's going to listen to you. But before I step away from Nick Saban, there's not enough I can say about Nick Saban because he always had great teams. His teams were well coached. They did every aspect of the game right, and the guy had class. You're not going to see any of that garbage like we saw from that clown in Eugene last year. Never saw that, never once from a guy like Nick Saban because he had class, because he was a winner. He wasn't playing for clicks. How about that, jackass? But he just and he like you look back at Bill McCartney and obviously the greatness was there in terms of wins and losses. But what really stood out about Bill McCartney was his assistant coaches went on and became coordinators and head coaches, right? So he hired good people and he developed them and built up the coaching tree. And Nick Saban did more for this sport, I think, than probably anybody that ever lived. And it's a shame to see him go. But people were like, well, he's leaving because of this, because of that. Dude, he's 72, man. Let the guy just walk away because he's ready. Jesus. So I wouldn't read any more into it than that. But I think Coach Prime is uniquely talented and gifted to follow in those footsteps. And Coach Prime's got talents that other coaches just don't have, and abilities, and he's not given credit for that yet. But in order to get that credit, you have to win games. So he has to show that he can win. And quite frankly, he's got to win at a higher level than a 6-6 level. He's got to get the bowl games and win conference championships and get in the playoffs and things like that. And then you begin to become more taken seriously, So I think we are privileged beyond belief still. All the different little controversies that keep popping up like whack-a-mole for CU football, cannot take away from the fact that we have a gifted human being as our head coach, and not just in his abilities in football, but he's just, I don't know. Again, I'm searching for superlatives because Deion Sanders is doesn't sound weird. He's a beautiful human being, man. He's a happy guy, and he lifts other people up. And his refusal to get into these, sort of tit for tat, say nasty things about people, and his son, or and his the guys he's brought in the team, and he's just a quality human being. And if for no other reason, even if I wasn't a CU fan, I'd want to see him succeed because he's just a quality human being.
Yeah, great stuff, William. You nailed it on the head there. You're not close to 72. Well, let's put that out there. But when you retire, and I know you love to go up to Minnesota. That's my home roots.
Yeah.
I lived in Minnesota until I was going into sixth grade. Again, we moved to Arizona. That's where the whole Martin Luther King Jr. Debate came up earlier. But let's find a quiet lake to fish on,
Right.
because Nick
Right.
Saban, and he's got his boat. I've seen some of the behind the scenes videos that they do with him, and in terms of how he relaxes and gets away from the grind. Let's do that. That sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, as I'm getting close to 60, I'm kind of hitting my stride in my career, but I'm ready to go. Not that it's coming anytime soon, but you get a little wore out, and the drama gets to you after a while, and there's certainly drama in my job, but good Lord, being Nick Saban and the head coach of a Power 4 program, there's nothing but drama.
Yep. Yep. William, we're going to tackle some questions with a Buff Stampede mailbag coming up tomorrow. But, as far as this show goes, it was a lot of fun to kind of catch up with you. And we're still kind of waiting to find out who the DC is going to be. So I think we've got a lot of podcasts coming up in the future. I know you have a busy work schedule, but we're gonna tackle all of these topics as we go through the off season.
Well, I think we got a lot of exciting things coming. I think we're not done with recruiting. We're not done with transfers, and we're going to see here in the next few weeks what kind of offense and defense we're going to run. We're going to get back into winter conditioning and watching Coach Mo get after these guys, and it's always fun to watch them push how hard they can push them out there. And we got some entirely new guys out there. Some of these offensive linemen, I can't wait to see them out there because last year, really, quite frankly, in those winter workouts, it was I'm blanking on who's our big guy that didn't get to play.
In what position?
At offensive guard.
Tyler Brown.
Yeah, you watch Tyler Brown in those workouts. You're like, oh my God, look at that guy. And then nobody else, on the offensive line really stood out. We got some guys. Some of these interior guys, Mayer and some of these guys on the offensive line are exciting. And it's going to be fun to watch that competition out there. So that's coming up. It's exciting times in Colorado football. If you think we're on the downhill side of the prime era, man, you missed the boat because we ain't even got rolling yet. This is like when you watch a rocket launch, right, and all the flames coming out the bottom, but the rocket ain't moving yet. Okay, it's about to start moving.
It feels like it. Yeah, I was curious when they were going position group by position group. Coach Prime was asking, who is a leader in your group? And you didn't see the camera pan over to know those guys. But my guess is Tyler Brown is that guy for the O-line.
Yeah, and I think he would have to be for the time being, unless some of those other guys begin to assert themselves, because nobody works harder than he does, But at the end of the day, you also have to get on the field and play in football to be one of the leaders. It's just really, no matter what you've done in the past, if you're not playing that particular year, you can't be one of the leaders until you're out there. And so, now he's going to get back out there and reassert that. But yeah, I can't see anybody else who would be that guy, with all these other guys just brand new. I would be surprised if by the end of summer, Justin Mares isn't one of those guys. Khalil Benson. So we'll see Tyler Johnson, but it's not going to be handed any jobs on the offensive line this year. Although we'll talk more about that at some point. But I still hope and expect that we'll bring in a couple more big guys like that.
All right, we're going to come back with a mailbag show tomorrow. I will address the drama with the Arizona Wildcats and their beat media team. I actually had a back and forth with a bunch of people yesterday, and so it's not going to be juicy like everybody out there wants it to. I have a lot of respect for folks involved, and I know that there was a learning moment involved for one of the folks that came back at me. So it's not going to be what you want it to be, because I'm going to take the high ground here. But William and I will be back with a new show. Do you have something to add there?
And aren't you going to put me on the catwalk so I can do my, little Paris turn?
We are. We're going to talk about.
man.
I don't know what happened in my life that we're talking about Paris and Fashion Week, but here we are. So definitely tune in, and I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode.